Have you ever felt a single moment split your life into before and after? For me, it happened on a quiet Thursday evening, standing in the corner of a glass-walled boardroom, staring at a woman I thought I knew. Her laughter echoed through the room, light, confident, familiar. But beneath that sound was a truth I hadn't yet uncovered, a fracture that would shatter everything I'd built. My name is Daniel Reed, and for most of my life, survival was my only ambition. Growing up in foster care teaches you to rely on no one but yourself. Trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. Yet here I was, 32 years old, the CEO of a multi-million-dollar tech company, and I'd built my empire on the one thing I swore I'd never need: people. And at the center of it all stood Emily Carter. She wasn't just my wife. She was my anchor, my confidant, the one person who made me believe love could be more than a fairy tale whispered in other people's homes. We met in college, back when I was just a scholarship kid with thrift store suits and borrowed books. She saw something in me before the world did. Over time, our lives became inseparable, a shared rhythm of ambition and devotion. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. 10 years since I'd founded my company, 10 years since the boy with no last name worth remembering became a man who commanded rooms. Investors, board members, and journalists filled the space, raising glasses in my honor. But while I shook hands and smiled for photographs, my attention was fixed on Emily, on the subtle way her hand lingered on another man's arm. His name was Jason Hale, my company's CFO and one of my oldest friends. He'd been with me since the garage days, back when the company was nothing more than a couple of second-hand laptops and big dreams. I trusted him with my finances, my future, and, unknowingly, something far more personal. The moment was small, almost imperceptible. A shared look between Emily and Jason, too intimate, too rehearsed. If I hadn't grown up reading People to Survive, I might have dismissed it as nothing. But I did notice. And once you notice something like that, you can't unsee it. I raised my glass, forcing a smile, but inside, the air thickened. A question began to carve itself into my thoughts like a blade against stone. What if the two people I trusted most had built a world behind my back? To understand how everything unraveled, you need to know how it all began. I met Emily Carter during my sophomore year at Stanford. She wasn't just beautiful, she had a kind of quiet assurance that made people lean in when she spoke. Her father was a renowned architect, her mother a philanthropist. She came from a world of polished dinner tables, weekend galas, and legacy. I came from foster homes with peeling paint and rules scrawled on kitchen walls. We shouldn't have fit together, but somehow we did. It started with a chance encounter in the library. She dropped her notebook near my desk, and when I handed it back, our fingers brushed. She smiled, and something in me shifted. Over the next few months, she became my anchor in a world I still felt like I didn't belong to. We studied together, shared late-night coffee runs, and talked about dreams that felt impossibly far away. She believed in me before anyone else did. When I confessed my fears about starting a company straight out of college, she didn't laugh. She drew up marketing ideas on napkins. She was the first person to call me Mr. So, long before the title meant anything. Jason Hale entered my life a year later. Unlike Emily, Jason came from a background I understood: middle class, scrappy, determined. He had a sharp mind for numbers and an easy charisma that made investors trust him. When I decided to launch my tech startup, Jason was the first person I called. Together, the three of us became a kind of unbreakable triangle: me, the visionary; Jason, the strategist; and Emily, the unwavering supporter. Those early years were brutal. We worked out of a cramped garage that smelled like old tires and burnt coffee. Emily brought us food when we worked late into the night. Jason kept the finances afloat when the money ran thin. I led the charge with relentless ambition. Every success we achieved felt shared, almost sacred. Over time, that triangle became the foundation of both my company and my personal life. Jason became like a brother to me. He stood beside me when I proposed to Emily on a windswept cliff overlooking the Pacific. He was the best man at our wedding. But looking back now, I can't help but wonder if the seeds of betrayal were sown even then, in moments too subtle to notice, in glances I dismissed as friendship. The night of the gala, when I caught that lingering touch between Emily and Jason, it wasn't just suspicion that filled me, it was the unsettling weight of history pressing down on me. Everything we'd built together was suddenly cast in shadow. And I could not shake the question that had taken root in my mind. Had the betrayal started long before I ever noticed it? In the days that followed the gala, a quiet unease settled over me like a fog that refused to lift. On the surface, nothing had changed, board meetings continued, quarterly reports were presented, and Emily still kissed me goodbye every morning with the same soft smile. But beneath that veneer, I noticed things I'd previously overlooked. Small things. Dangerous things. Emily had always been forthcoming about her schedule, but now her explanations came with slight hesitations, as if rehearsed. "Lunch with Claire," she'd say, eyes flicking to the side for just a second too long. Jason's demeanor shifted too, still charming, still reliable, but there was a new guardedness in the way he spoke around me, as if each word had been carefully weighed before leaving his mouth. One afternoon, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The building was quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies the sound of your own heartbeat. As I walked past the glass conference room, I saw them, Emily and Jason, standing closer than necessary, their heads bent in conversation. She laughed, lightly touching his arm. It was the same laugh I'd fallen in love with, but hearing it directed at him in that private, intimate way made my stomach tighten. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Years in foster care had taught me to observe before reacting. Instead, I started noticing patterns. Emily's late-night meetings, Jason's sudden insistence on handling projects alone, the way their text messages seemed to multiply whenever I was in another room. I'd never been the jealous type, but doubt has a way of seeping through even the strongest foundations. At home, our conversations grew strained. "Daniel, you're distant lately," Emily said one night, setting down her wine glass. "I'm just tired," I replied, though fatigue wasn't the problem. She studied me for a moment. "You're not telling me something." The irony of that statement nearly made me laugh. Meanwhile, the company was heading into a critical merger, one that would elevate us into the international market. Jason and I were working around the clock to finalize the deal. Or at least, that's what I thought. Late one evening, while reviewing financial documents, I noticed discrepancies. Minor, almost invisible, but enough to raise questions. Certain transactions had been rerouted, disguised under consulting fees. And Jason's signature was on all of them. My chest tightened as realization began to bloom. Not only was there a personal betrayal lurking in the shadows, but possibly a professional one as well. If Jason was moving funds without my knowledge, the consequences could be catastrophic. I closed the file slowly, my pulse pounding in my ears. I wasn't ready to accuse anyone. Not yet. But something inside me had shifted. The triangle we once shared wasn't unbreakable anymore. It was cracking, and I was finally starting to see where the fractures lay. And somewhere deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The breaking point came on a rain-soaked Friday night. The city was slick with reflections, neon signs bleeding into puddles, headlights slicing through the darkness. I'd stayed late at the office, combing through financial records again, hoping I was wrong. But the numbers didn't lie. Jason had been quietly siphoning funds through shell accounts for months. The betrayal wasn't subtle anymore. It was carved into spreadsheets and wire transfers. I sat back in my chair, the hum of the fluorescent lights loud in the silence. My best friend. My CFO. My wife's closest confidant. The pieces began to align in a way that made my stomach turn. Driven by an impulse I couldn't quite name, I opened Emily's email. We'd always shared passwords. It was a symbol of trust. What I found there made my hands tremble. Dozens of messages between her and Jason, their language wrapped in coded phrases that, at first glance, seemed professional. But beneath the surface, intimacy bled through. Phrases like, "our secret meeting," and "he has no idea," burned into my mind. The last thread of denial snapped. I forwarded the evidence to my private account, printed copies, and sat there for a long time, staring at the rain against the window. My chest ached, not with anger, but with a hollow kind of grief. The kind that comes when something you believed in dissolves before your eyes. I didn't confront them immediately. Instead, I planned. That weekend, we had a dinner scheduled at our house. Jason, Emily, and a few board members. I canceled the guests, keeping only the two of them on the invite list. I wanted to hear the truth from their lips, not through screens and bank statements. When they arrived, everything looked normal. Emily poured wine. Jason loosened his tie, laughing easily. I waited until we sat down. Then I placed the printed emails and financial documents on the table. "Why don't you both explain this to me?" I said calmly. The silence that followed was absolute. Jason's face drained of color, Emily's eyes widened. For a moment, no one moved. Then Jason reached for the papers, but I pulled them back. Months of financial manipulation. Secret meetings. And this, I tapped the emails, this betrayal I didn't see coming. Emily's voice broke first. "Daniel, I can explain." "No," I cut her off. "For once, I need you to tell me the truth without spinning it into something else." Tears welled in her eyes, and Jason stared at the floor. The truth came out in fragments. An affair that began 2 years ago during a business trip, rationalized as a moment of weakness, but repeated in secrecy. Jason had leveraged the affair to cover his financial schemes, knowing Emily's silence protected them both. Each word landed like a hammer. In that moment, something inside me went still. The storm wasn't outside anymore. It was inside me, and it had finally found its voice. The night of their confession is etched into my memory like a scar that never quite fades. After their words spilled into the room, heavy, tangled, desperate, there was a stillness that followed. Not the peaceful kind, but the hollow quiet that comes when something breaks beyond repair. I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything. I simply stood, pushed my chair back, and walked to the window. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside slick and glistening as if it too had been through a storm. Behind me, Emily was crying, those soft, uneven sobs I used to rush to comfort. This time, I couldn't move. "Daniel," she whispered, "I never wanted to hurt you." I turned to face her. "But you did," I said simply. Jason tried to speak, launching into explanations about pressure, loneliness, mistakes. But every word sounded like static. The man who once stood beside me through every challenge was now just another stranger with excuses. The following weeks were a blur of calculated decisions. I removed Jason from his position, presenting the board with undeniable proof of his embezzlement. Watching him escorted out of the building was surreal, not triumphant, not satisfying, just necessary. Emily moved out shortly after. There were no dramatic ultimatums or late-night pleas for forgiveness. Just two people acknowledging that the trust between them had withered beyond revival. For the first time in years, the house felt unfamiliar. Too quiet, too large. I'd built everything, my company, my marriage, my identity, on the belief that I could outwork my past, that I could create something unshakable. But betrayal has a way of slipping through even the strongest walls. In the months that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding, not just the business, but myself. Therapy sessions, long solitary runs at dawn, evenings spent relearning the sound of my own company. It wasn't easy. Healing never is. But slowly, the silence became less suffocating. One evening, I returned to that same boardroom where it had all begun. The city lights reflected off the glass walls, just like that night at the gala. But this time, there was no hidden glance to haunt me, no gnawing suspicion. Just me, Daniel Reed, no longer the boy from foster care trying to prove himself, but a man who had faced the worst kind of betrayal and chosen to keep moving forward. I don't know if forgiveness will ever fully come, not for them, and not for myself for not seeing it sooner. But I've learned this: trust can be broken, love can be lost, empires can fracture, and still, you can stand. Sometimes, survival isn't about fighting the storm. It's about walking out of it, soaked to the bone, and realizing you're still here.